When I visited museums as a teenager, the Neanderthals were always depicted as dumb, brutish creatures who could barely make a fire. Now, those who start with the history in God's Word know this picture is wrong because we didn't evolve, so there aren't any lesser evolved humans. Well, evolutionists have been slowly catching up with what we knew from the Bible.
Ken Ham, he's such a toad. But I want to talk about him today. He's usually not worth talking about. But I've noticed after watching several of his clips that he is obsessed with Neanderthals. And it took me a minute to figure out why. Because most Christians try and shove that stuff under the bed. They don't want to talk about it. But Ken Ham does, and he talks about them a lot. And it took me a minute to figure out where he was going with this. Now, in this 10 to 12 second clip that I have as the intro, he already put in a pack of lies. First of all, he isn't that much older than I am. And I know that by the 1970s, researchers had already dismissed that Neanderthals were brutes that grunted and didn't even know how to use fire. And in the museums and in books of the time, they were not depicting that. So that's one lie that I know he's telling. The second lie is that he is just proclaiming that humans didn't evolve, and the overwhelming evidence says that we did. That's just the facts. And number three, no one has ever said that there's lesser humans. Scientists don't talk about it that way. They never said there was lesser humans. And number four, the Bible never ever speaks of any other hominids. It doesn't discuss those. It's not in the Bible. And the Bible doesn't even really talk about other races unless they happen to be known to the Bible writers at the time. You notice that we don't have talks about Native Americans or Far East Asians. We have Near East Asians, but not Far East Asians. So he's just lying in that little clip. So why is Ken Ham so obsessed with them? And what I figured out is he's desperately trying to prove that Neanderthals didn't exist, even though he talks about it. He's desperate to prove that they're actually Homo sapiens. That's what he's getting at. That's what he wants to do, because how bad does it look for people who are creationists if we have distinct hominids, whether they existed before us, whether they coexisted with us? It looks so bad because it's never mentioned in the Bible, and it is a nail in the coffin for creationists. Let's look at the rest of the clip.
Last year, an article argued that Neanderthals should be reclassified as Homo sapiens because, well, they're more sibling than cousin. It's taken evolutionists decades to come to the same conclusion creationists came to from the beginning. Neanderthals, they're just like us.
I'm going to link the article that he's talking about down in the description so you can look at it, because, of course, he's being cherry-picking it. Of course, he's cherry-picking it, and he's being dishonest about what it says. This article is referencing one paper from 2024 where a scientist, or possibly a couple of them, are hypothesizing whether Neanderthals have so much in common with Homo sapiens that they should be reclassified as Homo sapiens. But the overwhelming consensus is that no, there's too many differences, both physically and culturally, for them to be classified as Homo sapiens. So that isn't true. I also like how he ignores the rest of the article, where they talk about how Homo sapiens and Neanderthals were interbreeding at least 120,000 years ago, which, according to his worldview, would mean that was about 110,000 years before he even thinks the Earth was created. So that's ridiculous. But let's see more dishonesty. Take a look at this clip.
Don't trust the TV depictions. You see, most people's view of cavemen comes from TV programs that depict so-called cavemen as dumb, hunchback brutes who can only grunt a few syllables. But that picture is a lie. We know now that these people who lived in caves made musical instruments and tools, wore jewelry and makeup, heated their cave homes, and even used a lunar calendar. Don't get your view of our ancestors from the media. Look to God's word, which tells us all people are descended from Adam and Eve and made in God's image.
If you're wondering about my background, I'm visiting my sister, so I'm in my nephew's room. I'm sitting in his gaming chair. I haven't taken up gaming. Okay, so number one, uh, caveman is a meaningless word. It doesn't mean anything. It only means hominids that lived in caves, and that could be Neanderthal, but it could be early Homo sapiens like Cro-Magnon man or Desanovans or any humanoid that lived in a cave. So right off the bat, that's a ridiculous word to even use when you're talking in a scientific way. Number two, you have to be literally an idiot if you're getting your information on what you think a Neanderthal looked like by watching Geico commercials or Night at the Museum. Okay, that has no bear. I would hope to think there isn't people that literally stupid. And number three, and this is the worst of all. Now, the clip that we just watched was titled "Why Neanderthals Are More Intelligent Than What You See on TV." So he's talking about Neanderthals. Neanderthals did not use a lunar calendar. That was early Homo sapiens that used a lunar calendar, not Neanderthals. There's absolutely no evidence of that. So he's being completely dishonest about what he's saying. But let's look at the next clip because it's hilarious.
Living in a harsh world. All this week, we're looking at Neanderthals through the lens of biblical worldview. So, when did these people live? Well, as we've seen, Neanderthals weren't subhuman or even our cousins. They were people, made in God's image, descended from Adam and Eve, just as we are. You know, these people were also descendants of Noah, living in the harsh world after the global flood just 4,000 years ago. You see, the flood caused an ice age, and people living in the northern climates had a very rough life. So many of the Neanderthals lived in caves because that was the available shelter in the cold, icy world. Neanderthals, they aren't a big mystery.
Okay, where do we even begin with this one? The flood caused the ice age 4,000 years ago when we know that the ice age ended 11,000 years ago. There was no ice age 4,000 years ago. And Neanderthals, yes, they did live through various ice ages over time, but the peak of the last ice age, the worst of it, was 20,000 years ago. And Neanderthal man was not around then. They died out or interbred with us. They're not even sure exactly what happened to them, but they died out 30 to 40,000 years ago. So they never even went through the peak of the ice age. He's so willfully ignorant or completely dishonest. I think it's a little bit of both, but mostly I think he's so dishonest. All right, we have time for one more clip. Let's take a look.
Neanderthal chemists? Yesterday we talked about how Neanderthals are usually depicted as dumb brutes, but the evidence reveals they wore makeup and jewelry, made weapons and musical instruments, and even practiced dental hygiene. Well, a new study found that Neanderthals also made their own glue and used a knowledge of chemistry to do it. The glue was so complex it had to have been created in underground chambers with little oxygen. Now, you've probably never pictured Neanderthal chemists, but that's because the evolutionary worldview has indoctrinated everyone to see them as brutes. But they were our relatives, made in God's image, like we are.
Yes, Neanderthals did use tar, and they used a primitive glue made out of ochre. And is that impressive? Yes, that's pretty impressive for people that lived 30, 40, 50,000 years ago. That is quite impressive, but they're not chemists. Okay, they were intelligent creatures. Even chimpanzees use tools, and they were far more intelligent than a chimpanzee. So this isn't some groundbreaking thing that proves that they're Homo sapiens. Other animals and other hominids, of course, are very intelligent. So I don't know what this has to do with anything. But here's the thing. He's incredibly desperate to prove that Neanderthals and Homo sapiens are the same, that they all came from Adam and Eve and Noah. And he has to do that because when we look at other hominids, like we talked about, ones that aren't even in our line, we did not evolve from Neanderthals. We are cousins with them. We have a common ancestor. And that is so damaging to their argument. I remember when I was a Christian, I was one that just, I knew they existed, but I tried not to think about it. That's what most Christians do. They try not to think about it. But what he's trying to do is take Christians that don't want to think about it. They don't want to do their own research, or they don't trust science, which so many of them don't. And he wants them to think that they're Homo sapiens. Therefore, they're no different than we are. That's what he's getting at. As if, just like we have Caucasian people and we have people that are Black or Asian, and he wants to group them in as simply another race. If you're a Christian and you're watching this, please do your own research. I spent so many years listening to buffoons like him, although I will say, even when I was a Christian, and many Christians do think Ham is just out there and ludicrous, but there's a lot of them that don't. And if you're someone who follows Ham, please do your own research. Read the article that I linked below. And would you give me a thumbs up or thumbs down if you didn't like it? It's okay with me. And leave me a comment, and I will see you next time.